All right, I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping things. My name is Brooklyn Olumba, and I'm going to be your moderator for this session. Before we introduce our wonderful, amazing speaker today, I just want to go over a few things. So first thing, if anyone needs closed captioning, there should be a button at the bottom of your screen. It's already activated. You just need to click on it if you do need those resources. And first off, just welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here. Again, for those who just came in, my name is Brooklyn Olumba. I'm going to be your moderator. Welcome to the Digitally Yours 2023 YSC Summit. In this session today, we have our amazing speaker, Ebony Harris, who's going to be talking about some great things regarding therapy. I just want to let you know that we're open to all questions. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So any questions that you think of during your time during this talk, please put them in the Q&A, not the chat function. It'll be easier for us to sift through them at the end. I also want to let you know that we're asking questions in the general sense. So please try to refrain from like medical advice or personal consultation, but we just want to make sure everyone's questions get answered. If you have any questions, feel free to message me, your moderator, privately in the chat function. And for further information about YSC or other events that we have coming up, please visit youngsurvival.org, and I'll put that in the chat. That is our current website. And then I just want to let everyone know that this session is being video and audio recorded. And so the sessions will be available 30 days after today for everyone registered for Summit. Okay. Awesome. So now, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker today. We've got Ebony Harris. She is a licensed relationship therapist, a keynote speaker, a podcaster, and an educator. She has been helping couples and individuals explore and heal their relationship patterns, childhood trauma, and unhealthy habits. Ebony helps her clients and audience understand and love the parts of them that create undesirable outcomes so they can transform those parts into extensions of who they know they are to their core. For over 10 years, brands like Essence, Bustle, Cosmopolitan, and Self Magazine have featured Ebony, an expert in relationships and sex. Although this is true, Ebony has found that she's truly an expert on love. Whether the topic of self-love, romantic love, platonic love, or love in your life, Ebony is able to speak to how love is able to transform and motivate individuals to live the life they desire and create the relationships they deserve. Thank you so much, Ebony, for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow you to go ahead and do so. And just a reminder to please put your questions in the Q&A. We have a great person to answer all of them for us. So without further ado, Ebony, it's all yours.
All right, thank you so much for that introduction. So let me go ahead and share my screen. This is going to be heavy on the information, but please, if you have any questions, I know that when it comes to starting therapy or thinking about finding a therapist, it can feel like a daunting task. So I'm hoping that this is helpful as far as getting started. So Brooklyn already gave me a good introduction, but just a little bit more about me. I just call myself because it's sometimes easier than going through all the letters. But my licensure, I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also own Ema Services, which is my private practice based in Texas. And I'm co-founder of Melanin and Mental Health, which focuses on reducing the stigma of mental health in Black and Latinx communities while trying to get more clinicians of color to serve those communities. And some of my specialties include relationships and sex, Black mental health, self-care, and wellness. So today we're going to talk about just all things starting therapy, like what is the point, what are the benefits, things you may need to know about therapists in general, how to find the right therapist, and how to pay for therapy, right? Because I know that sometimes is a barrier to treatment. But before we get started, I, as a therapist, like to start with a little bit of a grounding meditation moment. And so it'll be very quick. We'll get right into the content. But if you can, please take some time to place yourself in a comfortable position. That can be seated, laying down, just something that makes you feel secure, where you're not wobbling, you're very secure in the space that you're in. And I just want you to take a few deep breaths and let your chest rise and fall with each inhalation and exhalation. And when you're ready, let your eyes drift closed, or you can just relax your eyes and look down at the ground in front of you if you're not ready to close your eyes completely. As you continue to breathe slowly and deeply, let your attention rest gently on your breath. feeling the movement as it enters and exits your body. Each time you exhale, let go of any tension. Relax your face, your shoulders, your belly, and your legs. On your next exhale, settle your attention to the area around your heart. Focus on feelings of love, compassion, empathy, and forgiveness. With your attention on your heart center, bring to mind something that you are grateful for or someone that you are grateful for. As you continue with easy, relaxed breathing, perhaps you feel grateful for being alive, for being healthy, for being in this present moment. Perhaps you're grateful for the abundance of nature that produces food to nourish your body and beautiful scenery to nourish your soul. Bring your attention to people who truly nourish you in your life and how they bless you with their presence. Feel gratitude for your own life and the many gifts you have been blessed with. Now bring your attention to how gratitude feels in the area around your heart. With each inhale, let this feeling grow outwards. Let this feeling expand to fill your chest, your arms and hands, your legs and your feet. With each inhale, this feeling of gratitude grows, filling you up. And now, even as you return your attention to your breath, let your body remember the sensations of your gratitude. And when you're ready, you can bring your attention back to the presentation. I am a big meditation, taking a moment between activities just to kind of get us present in the current moment. So I hope that was helpful for all of you. All right, so let's jump right in. So we're going to start with just talking about some of the benefits of therapy. When we're talking about therapy, one thing I want you to remember is you don't have to be in crisis to go to therapy. We can all benefit from therapy, and going doesn't mean that you're broken or crazy or there's something wrong with you. It just means that you value your mental health, right? And so there are a lot of different benefits that are there as to why people choose therapy or why people even think about like maybe therapy is something I want to do for myself, right? And the first one I think is a huge one is that there is a space just for you. Oftentimes when we are living our life, right, we have all these spaces that are shared and reciprocal, right? We have friends, we have family, these relationships that both people have to participate in, right? So that means I get to share some things, but I also have to listen to this other person's experience. If I'm stressed, but they're stressed, maybe I have to think about that a little bit before I start sharing any difficulties that I'm having. But when you go to therapy, that space is just for you. That space is just for you to kind of navigate and process and understand your world and your experience in your life, right? And that's extremely important for us because there are so few spaces where we have that, right? Therapy also allows you to improve your communication skills. It helps you learn to resolve conflict, learn how to communicate in an effective way, helps you really speak up for yourself, right? And so it's extremely important for people that may struggle sometimes to advocate for themselves, to talk to other people and let them know what they need. Therapy can help you with that. It also increases your self-awareness. And this is when I'm working with individuals or couples, this is the first skill that I start to work on because I think it's extremely important to understand while we often are very quick to know how other people impact us, how things around us make us feel bad. We're not always aware of the power and the control that we have. And having self-awareness is really about you empowering yourself and understanding that you can decide the life that you have. You can't control everything, obviously, but there are a lot of areas that you can. And so finding those areas so that you can feel more empowered and that you do know more about yourself and who you are. It also is a good way to develop coping skills and strategies. Coping skills are extremely helpful when we are in high tension situations. Coping skills are extremely helpful when we are in situations that we can't control. How do I calm myself? How do I learn to deal with the situation as it is until I get to a space where I can make changes? And a big part of therapy is finding healthy, positive support, not only through the therapist, but understanding what that looks like so that you can start to build these communities and build spaces for you to have support outside of the therapeutic relationship. It also helps you strengthen your relationships. A big part of therapy and being a good therapist is understanding boundaries and understanding that we are not here to save our clients and that we want them to be empowered, speak up for themselves, to ask for what they need, and to learn how to set boundaries with the people they care about, because that's a form of self-care and self-love. And we also want to make sure that we're helping with any negative emotions or thought patterns that are disrupting us. We learn how to change those. Not just negative emotions, right? Because there is nothing wrong with negative emotions. That is a part of life. But when the emotions disrupt your life, when they're causing any type of ongoing stress or anything like that, then we want to work on what do we need to do to manage our emotions and learn how to allow ourselves to feel the emotions, but also how to get out of it when necessary. And the same with negative behaviors, right? We want to also learn how do we change negative behaviors? How do we improve anything that's causing a problem within our life? So there are a few things that you should know about therapists, just because when you're thinking about starting therapy, it can be difficult to know like what type of therapist you need or what's normal and what's not normal. So as I stated before, I'm the co-founder of Melanin and Mental Health, and we do a lot of work within our community, just helping to reduce the negative feelings toward mental health support and therapy and things like that. And so we hear all kind of stories of people saying like, well, is this normal or is this okay? Like my therapist said this and my therapist did this, but I don't know if that's normal or not. So I just want to kind of share some things that you should know about therapists that can kind of help you navigate the process of building a relationship with a therapist. And so, oh, sorry, I skipped way ahead. Okay, here we go. So the first one is that all therapists are different. There are different types of licensure, which we'll go through in a little bit. There's different ways that people approach therapy. Therapists can come and say, I do a lot of work with childhood experiences, right? So I am a therapist that focuses on self-awareness. I'm a therapist that focuses on how our childhood experiences and our previous experiences impact our lives now. How does that impact our relationships? So a lot of the work I do will go back to your history, right? We're talking about an issue right now and how it's impacting you. And the first question I'll say, okay, when did you first start to feel this way? When did you experience this in your childhood? Things like that, right? That's one type of therapy. There are other therapists that are very focused on the here and the now and helping you with navigating the current situation and how do you manage these situations and how do you make decisions about what's happening now moving forward. There are therapists that combine both of those. It's just so many types of therapists, and when I go through the different licensures, and that'll kind of give you more information, but just understanding that not all therapists are going to be the same, and so really understanding what works for you is important. And this is why we kind of speak to therapy or finding a therapist like a dating game sometimes, where you do have to sometimes try on a few different therapists to see if they work for you. And if they don't, it's perfectly fine. It is okay to decide, okay, this doesn't necessarily work for me because I need something that's a little bit more direct, or I need to get to the root of these issues so they're not impacting me in the same way, right? I, as a therapist, also go to therapy, which we'll talk about later, but going through that process of finding a therapist that works, it was difficult, right? There were some therapists that were a lot more directive and why aren't you doing this and just do that? And I don't necessarily respond to that. I needed more of a calming presence, someone that's kind of like listening, but also challenging me in a way that feels like it's coming from care as opposed to just telling me what to do. So that was something I had to kind of like work through and figure out as a client of a therapist, right? And so just understanding that they come in all different forms, and once you get very clear on what you're wanting to get help with, therapist that kind of fits those needs. Along with that, counseling is not all about giving advice. And
Just checking in. I think, Ebony, we maybe had a little bit of a connection issue just there. Okay, I think you're moving again. Try again. As Ebony is connecting back, everyone, I just want to set the reminder. Please feel free to, as you're thinking of your questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure we get to those at the end. Ebony, you might need to refresh your Wi-Fi or maybe hop out and come back in. Okay, everyone, thanks for hanging out. Ebony's going to come right back in and we'll make sure that we get right back up. Okay, you're muted, Ebony.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay. Not sure what happened there, but is my screen back?
Looks great.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. So just going back to the therapist not giving advice, we give information, we give feedback, but the goal is not for us to tell you what to do in your life. You are the expert on your life. And so while there can be more, if we're thinking about like cognitive behavior therapy, that gives you a lot of tools, a lot of like understanding of like what to do when you have certain behaviors that you want to change or certain emotions that you want to work through. They do give you skills and things to practice, but the reality is you get to decide how you want to use that because you are the expert. Okay. And so just making sure that you're not going to a therapist, some people do. And even if your therapist is a solution-focused therapist, they will give you feedback, but recognizing that you get to decide how to use that information, and your therapist is not there to give you all the answers. The therapist is there to help you learn how to get the answers for yourself. Another thing about therapists is that they always are continuing to learn. We have to do continuing education. So they're always growing and learning, specifically in the areas that they are experts. Usually I do a lot of continuing education around relationships and sex and self-awareness and things like that. That's kind of what I focus my continuing education on. And I think it's also important to understand that higher price does not always equal quality. I always hear people say, well, therapy is so expensive, therapy is so expensive. And while there are people that specialize, which is why sometimes they do have a higher price, I think you want to focus on what do I need help with and how do I find a therapist that fits that, not necessarily looking for, well, if this therapist is $200 and this therapist is $100, then the $200 therapist must be better, right? That's not always. And so just making sure that you're keeping in mind, like, what do I want to work on and how do I find a therapist that knows how to work with that specific thing? And just, again, therapists need therapy too. Therapists are humans and we're continuing to grow and we're continuing to heal and we're doing the same work that you're doing. And you want a therapist that has consultation, that has other support so that they can fully show up and be present and help you with your stuff and what you need help with. And so let's go ahead and quickly talk about the different types of therapists. Just again, so you can, when you're thinking about looking for a therapist, you can know what you're looking for. So a licensed professional counselor is a counselor that focuses a lot on just life as far as the individual. This is kind of a general, they work with individuals around family, relationships, all of that, but a lot of times they focus on working with just the individual. A licensed clinical social worker or a licensed social worker, they're more trained in community mental health issues. They're more trained on like getting you resources and things like that. So while they do therapy as well, they may be able to get you connected to resources within your community that can help you as you go through your therapeutic process. Licensed marriage and family therapist is similar to a licensed professional counselor. It's just they have more training when it comes to marriage, relationships, and family, right? So they learn a lot about family dynamics. They learn about a lot about group dynamics and understanding the impact of your social circles as a whole and how they impact you as an individual. And then a psychologist is typically used for testing, assessment, official diagnoses, things like that. So licensed professional counselor, clinical social worker, or marriage and family therapist cannot diagnose you. A psychologist or a psychiatrist can diagnose you. And then a psychiatrist can diagnose and also prescribe medication. So psychologists are typically either PhD or PsyDs, which is more research-based or clinical-based, and psychiatrists are medical doctors. And so they can actually prescribe medication. And so this is why sometimes you will have a team, right? You might have a psychiatrist that you see to get your medication. You might have a psychologist who diagnoses you or does testing if you're in school. And then you might have a therapist that you see on a weekly basis. So some people have multiple clinicians that they work with. So let's go to the steps to finding a therapist. So like I said earlier, finding a therapist is similar to dating. So it takes some time to figure out what that looks like and what type of relationship you want to have with your therapist. What we know about clinical outcomes is that 70% of positive clinical outcomes is based on a relationship that you have with the therapist. So it is important that you find a therapist that you click with, right? That you feel comfortable with, that you enjoy talking to and engaging with, that you value their opinion, because that does positively impact the outcome of your therapeutic process. So the first thing is just identifying what you want to get out of therapy, right? Having a clear goal of what you want to work on in therapy helps narrow down your therapeutic choices, right? If you feel like, okay, I'm not going to therapy because I have a diagnosis, or I don't think I would want to do medication, then you know that you're not going to necessarily look for a psychiatrist, right? Or a psychologist. There are some psychologists that also do more of the clinical weekly therapy work. But if you know that medication is not a thing, then you don't need to look at psychiatrists as well. It also helps you measure like the progress, right? If you can say like, what does life look like if therapy worked out for me in 4 months, 6 months, 8 months? Like, how will my life look different? It helps you to really hone in on what things you want to work on, right? And then you want to find therapists that they have the qualities that matter to you. So as I stated, I am a relationship therapist, but I work with individuals and couples. But typically people come to me because they're having relationship issues. I'm having issues with my mom. I'm having issues with my partner. I'm having issues getting into a relationship. So that's what people typically come to me for, because that's how I brand myself. That's what I've studied the most. And so that helps them figure out like who they want to work with. It helps them know that I'm the person they want to work with. And so as you are identifying the issues you want to address, then you should look at what qualities are important to me when it comes to a therapist. Do they need to be specialized in anything in particular? Do they need to be LGBTQI friendly, right? Do you want someone who's done some anti-racist training? Like, what are things that are extremely important for you when you're looking for a therapist, and kind of come up with those qualities as you start to look. And then when you get to the point of, okay, you kind of know what you want, start asking for referrals. And referrals can come from all different places. We always say start with friends and family, because these are trusted people, right? And especially as the conversation around mental health and therapy starts to normalize, you'd be surprised how many people that you know actually are already seeking a therapist. But look for a referral. Also, you can talk to your physician. You can look at your insurance companies, or if you have an employee assistance program within your job, you can go there and start to find a therapist within those qualifications there as well. And then once you have your therapist, or have a few, I would say like pick like 2 or 3. Don't just pick one, because you'll get disappointed if they have a long wait list, or just doesn't quite fit as far as like financial compatibility or whatever. But pick 2 or 3 that feel good for you, and then reach out to them and see if they offer phone consultation. Some therapists do, some therapists don't. I think it's important for you to be able to ask questions ahead of time. Typically therapists will offer like a 10 to 15 minute, just check in, hear the prices, get to know a little bit of my personality, I get to know a little bit of your personality, any questions that you may have as far as like, what does therapy look like? How do you work with this specific issue? That type of stuff. So call them, reach out to see if they do a phone consultation, reach out to see if you can get more information from them when it comes to working with that particular therapist. So those are some very, very basic steps when you're looking for a therapist. And I think, again, it's a process. So we want to make sure that you have a few different options to see what works. And if one relationship doesn't work, if you're working with a therapist and it starts to feel like, I don't know if this is exactly what I wanted, that is perfectly fine. The therapist's job is to help you on your healing journey, and that includes if they are not the right therapist for you. You can let them know like, hey, I kind of wanted to work a little bit heavier on this, and I don't know if this is helping me with that. And see if they have referrals, right? See if they have other people that they may be able to refer you out to. But I completely understand if you say this just isn't working for me, and you choose to say, I just need to stop therapy right now and I need to find someone else on my own. But just again, it's a whole process. So we want to make sure that you understand it may not be the first person you've met. Some people luck out, right? A lot of people luck out and find a therapist and like feel comfortable and it works for them. And also understanding that even if you've worked for a therapist for a while, sometimes we outgrow a therapist and the issues. Again, I'm a relationship therapist, so a lot of people come to me for that. Once they feel that their communication strategies, their problem solving, sex, finances, all that stuff within their relationship have gotten better, then it might be time to refer them out to find an individual therapist if there are more things they want to work on by themselves. And so that's okay as well. Sometimes we outgrow our therapists, and that's okay. And so just giving you that information just so you can feel comfortable with saying like, hey, this may not be a good fit for me right now. But, or maybe I've kind of outgrown this, and so I need to find someone else that does a different type of specialty. That's okay as well. Okay, so I think this is oftentimes, the biggest question is, or the biggest concern is, therapy is not affordable, right? A lot of people feel as though they can't afford therapy, but they haven't done, a lot of research, or maybe it's just based on what you've heard about therapy. Therapy is expensive. Therapy is expensive. And the first thing I always like to say is that it is relative, right? The expensive is based on your own budget, your own financial situation. And so one therapist, again, if we go to $200, $150 therapist, it just depends on what your budget is, what your needs are, and how you plan to pay for it. So there are different ways to pay for therapy. I always say, if you have an employee assistance program within your company, check that out, see what they offer, see how many sessions you get. Often it'll be, you can get 3, 6, sometimes 20, depending on the type of program they have, sessions for free, right? And so if you've never done therapy before, if you're just not sure, like, I want to start therapy, but I'm not sure what I want to work on, I think an EAP is a really good place to start, because the way it typically works is you get a certain amount of sessions per issue, per person within your family. And so that means if you want to go to therapy to work on your relationship, they can give you 6 free sessions to work on your relationship. Okay. And then after those 6 sessions, you say, okay, that's good. I also need to work on stress from work. You get another 6 free sessions. Okay, well, my child is struggling in school. They get 6 free sessions. So really, really, if you have an employee assistant program at your job, check out those benefits and take advantage of it, especially, again, when you're first starting and you're not sure exactly what kind of therapist you want. I think it's a good place to start. Also, if you have insurance, call your insurance company. They will give you a list of clinicians that take your insurance. And that's another place to start. And typically those rates are, depending on the insurance, you sometimes have a copay, maybe like $20 to $40, sometimes $80. But those, the way insurance works is either you pay the copay and the insurance pays another percentage of it to pay the therapist, or your copay covers for the therapist. But that's another way to get lower cost therapy with someone that's within your insurance. And, it's a good way, again, to start. And sometimes it's harder if you don't, to find like a specialized person, but sometimes they do have a list of people that specialize in what you need. There's also sliding scale. If you reach out to a therapist and you want to work, you want to be mindful of, some therapists offer sliding scale. Some therapists have therapists in training that are with them at their site, and so they can also offer less expensive therapy. So it might be $20, $40, $50 for the sliding scale. And some people base it on your income. So you bring income documents, and then that'll kind of help them decide how much you should pay within the sliding scale. There are also scholarship opportunities. Check in with the therapist with that, and I'll have some list of options at the end as well. But some therapists do scholarships, so instead of doing a sliding scale, they'll have a couple slots that they say, hey, I have 2 slots that I keep open for sliding scale or for scholarship, and so you get $100 off each session, right? So my normal rate is $160, you pay $60, and it's $100 scholarship for your first 8 sessions, right? There are also a lot of community programs. I know in Houston we have a program called Legacy that offers some counseling at a discounted rate. And then also check out local universities. A lot of times they have therapists in training there who are under the supervision of PhD, doctoral level therapists. And so that's another way to get free or low cost therapy. And then of course there's cash pay, which can range whatever the therapist rate is from, it could be $20 up to $200, $300. It just depends on the therapist, their rate, their specialty, and all of that. So those are the different ways. It's a lot of different options. So I don't want, finances to be a barrier to therapy, because there are a lot of different options out there. And so going back to looking for a therapist, these are some of my favorite directories that focus on specific groups. At the bottom, I put Psychology Today. That is the biggest one, who you can go in and put color, location, ethnicity, LGBTQ, whatever you're looking for, you can put it in there and they'll give you some, but there are more specialized directories. The other ones are more specialized. So Melanin and Mental Health, like I said, that's mine. And that one is focused on Black and Latinx communities. Latinx Therapy focuses on Latinx communities. Asian Mental Health Collective has therapists of Asian descent. National Queer and Trans, the therapist of color. So these are some options if looking for a therapist and if you want somebody that is specific in these areas. Because sometimes when looking for a therapist, you're looking for a baseline. Like, this person understands me, this person gets me in this way. And so then we can kind of start our work from there, right? That doesn't mean that having a therapist that doesn't look like you or have the same experiences as you won't be helpful. But sometimes it's just a little easier to find people that have some similarities to start with, again, when we're starting to build that relationship, and especially when we know the relationship is the most important part. So feel free to take a screenshot of this or whatever you need to do. And then we're gonna go into the financial part, right? So these organizations offer financial assistance. The Loveland Foundation, I believe, is for young Black women. Open Path Collective is for anyone who's looking for financial support. Grouport, I like that because sometimes if we cannot feel like that it's hard to find a therapist one-on-one that we can afford, Grouport offers I think it's $35 weekly, and you do small groups around the same issues. And so that's a good place if you're just kind of like, I would like, and if you find value in the group setting, some people enjoy having that community and having that support and having other people that are going through similar things with them as well. So that's a good place to start. And then Cerebral is another online option that offers, I think, a monthly fee that you pay to get therapeutic services. So those are some of those options. Again, write it down, take a picture. And that is all I have. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know we have about 10 more minutes. So if there are any questions that we need to go through, I'm ready.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ebony, for that. All good info. As I was writing down questions myself, it was like the next slide. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm encouraging everyone to please continue to write your questions in here. I know I have a couple myself, but we're going to start with the ones from our group. So the first question is, can you share some additional questions you could ask to vet out a therapist on a phone call? I'm assuming for a consultation to see if they're the best fit for you as far as experience with young cancer patients. You know, we're all here at Young Survival Coalition. So what are your thoughts on that?
So definitely when you're in the consultation, you want to say, hey, this is what I have going on, right? I'm a cancer survivor. This has impacted my life in this way. And I just want to know, do you have any experience in helping people with challenges that are similar to mine, right? What is your approach to change? How long do you anticipate therapy to be, right? So those are questions that you would ask that's very much around how would my cancer history be a part of the therapeutic experience, right? Like, how do we have that conversation? Because what happens a lot of times is we don't want to have to always bring it up, right? So we want to have a therapist who is aware, who understands that this has been a big change in your life and that it is aware of like how this impacts relationships and your feelings about yourself and your body and all of those things, right? And so you want a therapist who is willing to kind of bring that to the forefront so that you don't feel like you have to always bring it up. And so ask them if they had any specialized training around working with cancer survivors, right? And what has the outcomes been? Of course, they can't give details about their previous clients, but it's a good question to kind of ask, like, what kind of outcomes have they seen when they've worked with other clients in this that have similar stories as you? So definitely, I would bring it up sooner than later because you want to make sure that this is someone who is not going to shy away from it in any type of way, and that's going to be able to answer those questions directly and help you as much as they can.
I love that outcomes part. Like, what have, you can't share about other people, but like you said, what have other people gone on to do? Right. I think that's a very useful question. I love that. Piggybacking off of that question, I know we have a lot of people in this community who might still be in active treatment. What are options? I know you had mentioned the initial consultation can be over the phone, but what are options, if any, for virtual versus, I guess, if it would still be in person versus virtual, what that's like, navigating that conversation? Is that something that everyone does, or do you have to find someone who specializes in that?
That's a really good question. If this was pre-2020, it were probably a little bit more difficult. There were therapists that did virtual, definitely, therapists who offered over the phone or video here and there. But since COVID, most therapists have that as an option within their practice, right? Sometimes the hardest part at this point is finding therapists that have an actual physical office, because a lot of people have started doing virtual and they've stuck with virtual. So, but definitely that is an option for you to be able to find a therapist who does virtual and in person, and you just let them know, again, I'm in a consultation. So I have treatment going on, so I won't always be able to come to office, or even letting them know about cancellation. So this is a big part. A lot of therapists have like cancellation fees, right? So if you cancel less than 24 hours, then they charge you the price of the session, or there's some type of a fee. If you let them know ahead of time what you have going on, then they probably will work with you to say, okay, this is a different type of a situation, right? And my clients know I have a cancellation fee, but if you have an emergency, like, that's not you're gonna waive it, right? I'll have a client come on and say I have a migraine, and I'm like, okay, look, let's cancel it. You won't get charged. Like, I don't want you to not be able to show up fully as you need to. But I also understand that, just because you have low energy doesn't mean you still don't want to show up for therapy, right? And so I think it's important to, again, because it's post-COVID, most people do virtual, so you can definitely, check in with them when you first do your consultation. And even if they don't necessarily do video, they might say, hey, if you couldn't come into office, we could do a phone call and have a full session via phone call. It's a little different, but it's still as effective as an in-person session. And then also check in with the cancellation fees and make sure that they are willing to be flexible with that in case there are things that come up that you can't come to session and you don't find out till the day of, or you don't feel good the day of. Like, they should be able to be flexible with that.
Y'all, Ebony has given us all the tips. So I hope y'all are taking notes like I am. I also want to ask, in this era of social media, we are often, I don't know about everyone else here on the group, but I follow so many mental health pages on my Instagram. I follow therapists. I follow Ebony, and I'm hoping that she will drop her handle in the chat for us too. But sometimes we're finding therapists that are in different states, and they often have their in their bio, maybe a link if you want to schedule a consultation. Is there any issues with, I'm not sure how it is in the therapy world as far as licensures? Can you schedule therapists who don't maybe live in your state, but you found them on Instagram and you'd really like to have a session with them? Does that matter? Or what kind of things should we be thinking about with that?
That's a really good question, because as much as social media has become a huge part of like marketing or just therapists kind of putting their information out there, those are the limitations with licensure, right? And so most therapists can only practice in the states in which they're licensed. The good thing is a lot of therapists are starting to be licensed outside of those states, right? Therapists are starting to get licensed in multiple states because they understand that people have access to them that aren't only in their state. Along with that, some therapists offer coaching options because coaching isn't based in any type of a licensure, right? So I may not be able to be your therapist, but I can be your coach. Paperwork may be a little different, maybe just an acknowledgement of like, we have a different type of services. To be honest, the services pretty much look the same, but it's called something different, so it's not falling under that licensure. So, and I think that's sometimes the hard part, because the more that therapists are marketing themselves in that way, people kind of connect with you, right? Like, oh, this person seems like a good fit for me, and I like the way they talk, I like what they do. And then you find out they don't live in your state, it can be a little bit difficult. So, so definitely, again, therapists are really good at, if you're looking for a therapist, find a therapist and ask for referrals. They typically have referrals in all different places. But as well as just asking, like, do you offer coaching for clients that aren't in the states that you're licensed, right? That's an option as well. Because again, I get it. And I've had quite a few people that'll reach out and say, oh, I live in New York, I live here. And so then trying to navigate that so that they can get the help. And again, that therapeutic relationship is so important. And so you don't want to like push people away once they felt like they found their person.
Awesome advice. If I'm going to keep asking my questions. No one else is going to put in theirs. But like I said, continue putting them in the chat. Most of us are tied around the cancer community in some way. I'm sure some of us have either been through treatment, some of us might be pre-vibers and have yet to go on through treatment, but maybe had some type of genetic predisposition, or maybe we're caregivers for someone with. And I know one of the first things you said is therapy isn't something that we should wait for until the very last minute, right? Would you say that you would encourage, at least for our specific community, that that's just something that we should all seek out?
Yes, definitely. I feel like when you first get a diagnosis or a possibility of a diagnosis or something like that, it impacts you in such a way that it is extremely important that you start building your support team as soon as possible, right? Just even the understanding of how is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact the people I'm in relationship with? Like, I think it's extremely important. So I'm a big believer in starting sooner than later and really building a relationship with the therapist so they can understand you, they can understand your experiences and all of that. And just start sooner than later. And I think also sometimes I have, I got connected with Young Survivors Coalition because I have a friend who recently finished treatment for triple negative breast cancer, and she was the one that suggested it. And I remember she had a therapist beforehand, and so when she found out, having that support system already in place was extremely helpful for her, because this is someone who knew her and didn't just know her as a cancer survivor, if that makes sense. And I think sometimes that once you kind of have went through your cancer treatment, or are going through it, that becomes such a big part of your identity, and it's good to have someone that may have known you before as well. So I'm a big proponent of like looking for a clinician that you just feel comfortable with. And even I have clients that come and go. They don't come consistently for years, but they'll come for like 6 months and then take a break and come back as things come up. But I know them, and I get in, and they appreciate that I'm a person that's been a fixture in their life for all these different parts of their life. And so I think that's important.
Very, very good advice. We do have one more question in the group chat. It said, do you think that Zoom therapy is equally as effective as in-person therapy?
Yes. There's actually some statistics around it, but I don't have it off the top of my head. But yes, the outcomes are about equivalent. There isn't a huge difference in it. The biggest part, the biggest factors that go into like how effective Zoom therapy is are the kind of expectations that the therapist put in place for therapy. So like with my clients, I'll let them know like, hey, be in a settled place. Like, don't be in your car driving while we're doing therapy. Make sure that you're in a settled place. I want you to have the camera set up. If it's your computer or a phone, try to have it set up where you're not holding it the whole time. And especially with couples, right? Because that was the biggest thing when COVID hit. Again, as a relationship therapist, a lot of couples is like, oh, we'll just wait until COVID is over because like we can't see you via Zoom. We need to see you in person. And I was like, okay. And then a month later, they all came back because COVID was stressful and impacted their relationships. And it can feel difficult to kind of manage some of those things sometimes. But therapists are typically, again, now that that's happened, you have to be trained in doing telehealth, right? You have to be trained in knowing how to like manage things via telehealth. There are so many resources with the platform I use specifically. I can share my screen, I can draw things, I can send documents, like, so it's to me, I found it to be just as effective, if not more effective, because people don't have the stress of having to try to get to an office in the middle of their workday or in the evening when they're tired from working all day. Like, it's a little bit easier to kind of be in your own space. But I also understand that there are people that are like, no, I need a space to go to because my home is too chaotic, right? So I need to get out of the house when I can. So I do understand that.
I definitely get that.
Yeah.
I like to go in person myself. We've got one more question that we're going to try to get to. I also put a comment in the group chat. You know, you guys are going to be getting an evaluation pretty soon from Summit, and there is a little bit of an incentive. You're going to be entered into a gift that is worth about $50. So please, when you get that email, try to fill out that evaluation. But our last question today is, what are your thoughts on EMDR therapy? And I had to look that up myself, but it is movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, which is a technique involving moving your eyes in a specific way to process traumatic memories. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that concept.
I am.
What are your thoughts on that?
I am. I'm not trained in it, but I have worked with therapists that are trained with it, and I've actually they've let me test out there. You can do it without a machine, but they have machines. And the idea is that it's connecting your left and right brain to understand like how traumatic experiences impact you and how it comes up for you now. I think it's extremely effective. Specifically because we have our body keeps our trauma stored, right? And a lot of times we can't get access to it. And so I think EMDR is a really good way to kind of like get access to those parts of the brain that have stored some of that trauma. And so I don't personally practice, but I will refer out, especially if there's a lot of trauma that's happened and someone needs to kind of unlock it a little bit. EMDR is really good for that. There's also trauma, trauma-informed yoga is really good for that, where there are certain positions that a trauma-informed therapist and yoga instructor can kind of move you and help release some of that stress. That's really good. And then I practice internal family systems, which is helping you connect with younger versions of yourself and all these different parts of you that kind of like if I have a stubborn part that doesn't let me listen to anybody else, like I can connect to that and understand where that comes from in my past, and then work with that younger version of myself to change that and move it into something else. So EMDR, trauma-informed yoga, and internal family systems are probably to me, the most effective when we're talking about trauma and we're talking about like stored, unhealed parts of us that we need to kind of get access to.
I'm going to give you the Zoom clap and my own clap. Thank you so much, Ebony, for sharing all of this with us. It was helpful. I hope everyone was able to get some notes in. I took some notes. I learned some new things today. So we just want to thank you again.